Good evening. I'd like to call to order the regular council meeting of Wednesday, November 20th. It is 7 p.m. We have an agenda in front of us. We have one addition under new business, and it is, there are a couple of recommendations that came to us today from the regional district with regards to Sechelt Public Library funding. And given timing, they start budget actually the day of our next council meeting. So in order to get it back to them in time to deal with that, we need to deal with it tonight. So we would put that under library recommendations, number 9, under new business. Any other additions or deletions? All right, I'd like to look for a motion to adopt the agenda as amended. Moved and seconded, all in favor? Thank you. So we have 2 delegations tonight. First delegation is it Mike Maggiato from Team Wolverine Athletics? Come to the front, please. And push the button and the microphone will come on. Thank you. Look forward to hearing your presentation.
Yep. First of all, thanks to the council for letting me present this evening. So what myself and my wife and my partner Randy would like to do, apologies she's not here tonight, just clashes, she volunteers at Christensen Village on a Wednesday evening, so she didn't want to let the seniors down this evening. So it's just myself presenting. So myself and my partner Randy, we have a business called Team Wolverine Athletics, and for the last 3 years we've been putting on trail running events on the Sunshine Coast. Our major event is the Puddle Jumper Classic, which is in June of each year, which is a 50k and a 25k race on the trails in and around Roberts Creek and Gibsons, which starts and finishes at Cliff Gilker. We also have a trail series, which is smaller races, which we have highlighting the different areas and the different trails along the coast, and that starts in Pender Harbour and then works its way monthly down to Gibsons. What we wanted to do in 2020 is to add an extra event to our roster, and this event is what's called a backyard ultra. So the slide here just gives a brief overview about myself and Randy and who is Team Wolverine Athletics. So I think I've kind of covered that off just in my initial discussion there. So with our events up to this point, over the 3 years, we've had just over 1,000 runners, some from the coast, but from Europe, from the US and other parts of Canada, coming to do our events. And there was an event that we noticed is gaining popularity, and that's, as I said, a backyard ultra. So what the basics of this is it's a last man standing event. It's a very simple event. We have a course of about 6.7 kilometers, or in old money terms, 4.1 and a bit miles. There's no real technicality to it, and that's why we were kind of looking at Kinnikinnick, because the trails there are quite wide, not very technical. We also felt as well that any part that we did use, obviously we want to make sure that we're not impeding the enjoyment of the community and the general public from using the trail. So we wanted to use a trail system where we could have the event and it wouldn't affect the general public using the trails as well. And the general kind of premise with a backyard ultra is that, as I said, there's not the technicality with the actual course itself, but it's strategy that comes into play, and it brings a different competitor into the event. Because what happens if they have an hour to do either an out and back course or a loop course, within that hour, they can go out as quickly as they want to. They could do that in 40 minutes and then have more time at the start-finish area to rest up, eat, get some fluids on board, or they could take their time and just have a few minutes in camp. But every hour on the hour, we would then send the runners off again to do another loop. So in the US, there's several of these events already, and these events have gone anything from 24 hours up to just over 60 hours. And so you do have some people where they play the strategy, and they'll do a 55-minute loop all the way through, and then people start dropping off, and then they start speeding up, and then suddenly you've got your last man standing. The great idea about this as well is once you're down to your last person, it's probably a little bit mean for them, but it's fun for the spectators. Once you're down to the last person, they have to go out and do another loop. If they don't do another loop, then everybody is a DNF, a do not finish. The other thing that we took into mind with respect to Kinnikinnick Park was its location, in that if we use the trails towards the field, then we're not creating any particular sort of noise issues in regards to residential areas. If we were to use a portion of the field for the start-finish area, the only thing that we feel that we would affect is perhaps the golf course and the local school. But we wouldn't imagine that we would have particularly large noise in regards to the event, just because it is such a long event that people are quite kind of relaxed, and it's a fun atmosphere rather than it kind of being like a loud kind of music concert or anything in that manner. Certainly, if we are able to proceed with Kinnikinnick, we obviously have discussions with both the golf club and the school as well, just to make sure that there was no issues with regards to us using the area. So the slide there just kind of goes over roughly what I've said there in regards to the use of the park. What I would mention as well is, obviously, if the council wanted to do any sort of background discussions in regards to our use of other parks on the coast, we'd be more than happy to put you in touch with the various members of Parks and Rec at SCRD that we've dealt with in the past. We've also had permitting from the district of Sechelt before we use Brookman Park for one of our events. And we also use the trails in West Sechelt around about Mason Road. So because it would be the first year of the event, we don't expect that there'll be large numbers of runners, and we don't think there would be a large number of spectators as well. So we don't think that there would be a large number of people that would make any particular issue regards noise or enjoyment of the park for any other users. We also felt that with Kinnikinnick, that using the park overnight hopefully shouldn't be an issue, because it's not the first time that that's occurred. As far as we're aware, the BC Bike Race uses Kinnikinnick each year. So we feel that this event, adding this event to our portfolio, as I said previously, we feel it would bring a different caliber of athlete to the event, and it would encourage more people over to the coast. In turn, we would hope, as per our other events, that bringing these people over to the coast would bring tourism dollars into local businesses. So people come over here and they need nutrition for the event. So maybe they go to Clayton's, or they go to IGA, or they go to Trail Bay to pick up items. Because the race would start early on a Friday morning and go through the weekend, these people would more likely probably come maybe a day or a couple of days beforehand. So there'd also be accommodation that was booked by them as well. And a lot of times with these sort of events, people have a couple of friends that they would bring with them to what we call in trail run to crew them. A bit like a pit crew if you're thinking about kind of F1 racing. So, you know, they come in from a lap and they get their tyres changed and they get the oil filled up. So, for example, I mean, I've put on the slide there one event that comes to mind is we're friends with the race director of the Squamish 50, Gary Robbins, and their event in Squamish, I mean, obviously it would take some years for our events to kind of get to that point, but the Squamish 50 over a weekend, they have 3 different events over that weekend. It brings in 1,200 runners plus all their kind of friends and family, and it brings in about, I believe about 1.5 to 2 million into the local community. I'm not saying we could do that for the coast, but we're hoping that we can get to the point where we are attracting more people to the coast, and it is having a positive impact on the local businesses. I mean, we've got an abundance of craft breweries on the coast, which is always attractive. Runners do like to drink, so that's a plus there. We've got great small businesses. I mean, off the top of my head, Lone Wolf has really good baked goods, and if somebody's after a burger, you've got pickles, etc. There's so many kind of good businesses on the coast, and it would be nice if we could get more people onto the coast and get more business through the door for these businesses. So what do we get out of this? Well, we are running this as a business, but we do love the community that we've got here on the coast, both the community as a whole, but there are quite a lot of trail runners on the coast as well. And so having an event like this would mean that there's more opportunities for people to get out there, have an enjoyable race, tell their friends about it, kind of get more people out and about on the trails. I mean, with something like a backyard ultra, because it's not like a 20 or maybe a 10K race where you're going from point A to point B or you're doing a loop, because it is slightly different, it may get a different demographic of local people from the coast to actually get into this event as well. The other thing that we saw as well is with the Backyard Ultra, there isn't one in BC at the moment. If we're able to do this on the coast next year, I think this would be a good way of kind of putting the coast firmly on the map. I do feel there's a tagline with Squamish that it's the outdoor recreation capital of Canada, but I think we've got more to offer on the coast than Squamish. I'm probably a little bit biased living here, but that's my thoughts. Does council have any questions at all?
Any questions? Councillor McLean and then Councillor Rowe.
Yeah, so you spoke of the economic impact of the Squamish 50 race.
Yeah.
And you obviously have experience with the Puddle Jumper Classic.
Yeah.
I believe in here it said you've had 150 racers this previous year in that race.
Yeah, so this year we had 200 signed up, and you tend to get a few numbers drop off. People get injured or they kind of change their mind. But we had 150 race on the day.
Perfect. So do you have a breakdown of how many of those are off coast versus on coast?
I don't have it. I don't have it to hand, but I could certainly dig through our registration statistics and get a figure back to you on email if that's okay.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Rowe.
Unless I miss it, what time of year were you hoping that this would take place?
Yeah, we were hoping for the middle of July.
Okay, thanks.
McLean.
One thing I would like to consider that Councillor Rowe got my second question with the timing of the event.
Yeah.
from an economic development standpoint, it is better to bring people to the coast, not in July and August. So if we can hold this event in, say, June or September or any other month, our hotels are less full, and it's helping support our tourism economy, kind of have that year support, get their revenues going through the year. So I don't know if anyone on council has similar thoughts or concerns.
I have a question. Approximately how many runners are you looking to bring your first year out with something like this?
In an ideal world, we'd like 100, but as it's the first year, we'd probably maybe have maybe 30 to 50 runners.
Okay. Any other
If
questions?
I could just address Councillor McLean's question there.
Sure.
We were looking at July just because there are so many events that are out there in BC at the moment that it's hard to pick a weekend that doesn't clash with another event. And with it being the first year of this event, we want to set it aside from other events so people will pick that rather than going, well, there's X, Y, and Z in September. I appreciate what you're saying regards, obviously there is a downturn in the fall and the winter for businesses on the coast. But then on the flip side to that, a lot of the businesses on the coast get through fall and winter by their summer trade. So if we are able to bring extra people onto the coast during the summer, that would hopefully kind of balance the books out in fall and winter.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, so typically when something like this comes forward to us, we don't make a decision here. We need to refer it over to staff to look at implications, et cetera. As you indicated, we do have BC Bike Race that comes, they initially started across the street and then outgrew that field and ended up there. They've outgrown that. And so we're looking at something else potentially. Yeah. But you're coming forward. We have also had indications that others may come forward, and we have other users of those fields. Yeah. We don't actually have a policy for this. So we need to refer this over to staff to look at the implications. There are other things like ball tournaments, et cetera, in the summer as well. So how do we work with all of the various users? So,
no, appreciate that.
Right. So I'm going to make a motion that we refer this to staff and bring back a report to council with potential options. Yeah. Okay. And is there a seconder? Seconded? All those in favor? Thank you. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you very much for your time.
Good luck on your activity.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. And our next delegation is Ross Powell with regards to the Sechelt Arts Festival.
Good evening, Mayor Seegers, councillors, and staff. My co-producer, Diana Robertson, who usually presents these, is out of town, so I'm happy to be here to present this report for the 2019 Sechelt Arts Festival. If we could go to page 18. This year's festival was able to fulfill the festival's mandates, which are mostly in line with much of the district's festival and event strategy, including providing accessible arts programming and showcasing local talent and all the benefits that accrue from that, including advancing cultural tourism, exposing students to diverse art forms and local heritage, and the hiring of a range of local businesses, arts, and technicians. To achieve this, we worked with several community partners besides the District of Sechelt, including Sechelt Archives, Sunshine Coast Museum and Archives, Sechelt First Nations, with whom we plan to continue our pioneering work in reconciliation and collaboration. Page 21 has a rundown of the shows and events we produced this year: 3 main stage performance events, 7 workshops, most of which were free, a major curated art exhibition and special heritage exhibit, and 3 free special events. If we could go to page 36, please. That'll give you some graphics of, oh, I'm one off. Go back one. There we go. This is becoming the Sechelt Arts Festival. Part of our mandate is to take local artists and give them opportunities to advance their practice, to do bigger shows than they would otherwise be able to do. And local Becky Azad really rose to the occasion this year, not only as choreographer director, but as producer, videographer, and technician. She actually learned how to assemble her video and graphics on an industry standard program called Cubase. Worked with Ravenscry lighting tech Bill Moisey on that, and also to design the lighting for her show. The show both allowed local dancers to step out into a professionally produced show and also dance with some professional dancers from Vancouver in a show that dealt with some pretty strong topics around youth perspective, around self-love and acceptance of others. We fully expect this show to have a legacy as Becky moves forward, taking her art on tour. Moving forward a page, the next 3 pages give you some shots of our annual gallery. Our show opening this year included performances by some local dancers. And we engaged Coast Streaming Arts Collective in mounting an experiential and immersive environment in the Arts Center, which the school classes that went through that apparently just absolutely adored, as they did our heritage display on the Two Helens, part of which I understand is now on display at Gibson's Museum. So that's the next page. There's the Two Helens. Page 40 is, no, back one, sorry. There he is, the marvelous Mr. Moisey. Bill Moisey is the main technician at the Ravenscry Theatre, and he has worked on many of Sechelt Arts Festival's projects, mainly as lighting director for the past few years. And I just wanted to note that we're very lucky here on the coast. We all know we have great artists. We also have some very talented technicians. Lighting, Bill as a lighting technician, Peter Leitz, who has been making everything at the festival sound fabulous since its very beginning. And we're very lucky to have them because productions like the ones we did at the Longhouse last year and a few years back just wouldn't be possible without having people like them to make it happen. Bill is also a talented composer and musician, and he brought us a virtuosic show of his rather avant-garde music. And this is a good example, actually, of another mandate the festival supports, which is artists pushing boundaries. Art is not always just about entertainment for the masses. But we do want to entertain the masses, and the next page will show you pictures of local fiddler Serena Eads' new band, Faja Docana, along with Celso Machado. We got to introduce her new band to her home community and had a kick and dance party. Page 42 shows some highlights from our fusion-themed workshops, including an informative totem walk and talk by Candace Campo. And one of the special events, oh, no, sorry. Try going there. There it is. Workshops. And one of the special events we did, we have a new group on the coast called Paintilio. And what they do is take a photograph and turn it into a massive paint by number. So we had that in Trail Bay Mall. The folks at Clayton's were overjoyed with this, the reaction to this, and they want to do it again. And the finished painting will be hanging in the mall shortly. So that's the shows and workshops. If we could go back to page 22, please, Jennifer. The 29 Fusion-themed festival engaged 94 performers and artists over 15 days, 31 production personnel or technicians were employed, including sound and lighting techs, stage managers, costume designers, graphic designers, carpenters and painters, photographers and videographers, to name a few. Over 50 volunteers were engaged throughout the festival, and something approaching 5,000 people were engaged as participants or spectators, including several hundred students in 13 school tours at the gallery and heritage exhibits, as well as additional visits to the interactive multimedia show, The Space Beyond, at the Arts Center. Pages 22 to 26 outline our marketing and media strategies, which basically boils down to the fact that we are moving steadily away moving steadily towards more online and electronic media and away from print materials, with the notable exception of the Coast Reporter, which is still an extremely important thing for getting the word out for our festival. We also shifted to a much cheaper brochure this year, which saved a lot of marketing dollars, and still managed to get the word out. We sold out 3 of our 4 main stage shows. Pages 17 to 18. Did I do that right? No. Sorry, my math is wrong. 12 plus 15 is 27? 27, thank you. Outline a few of our ongoing challenges that we face each year. Finding volunteers is always hard. For us, mainly due to the many hours we have the gallery and heritage displays open and need docents for that. So that and the fact that teachers are clamoring for more school tour spots. They basically sell out immediately to tour the heritage and the gallery. So we're looking at closing the gallery to the public during the week or part of the week, just running school tours, and then opening it up to the public on the weekend, which is when we get the bulk of people through anyways. Corporate sponsorship is very limited and community overburdened by so many asks. Grant funding for a municipal festival can be tricky. We've increased our ticket revenue since 2017, but we are now running up against venue size issues. The Sechelt Arts Festival is extremely grateful to the Sechelt Nation for sharing with us the 2 performance venues that we use the most, the Raven's Cry Theatre and the Sechelt Community Hall. These venues are somewhat limited, however, both in the kinds of shows we can produce and in audience capacity. Rehearsal space is also limited, with some shows requiring many months of rehearsal time. Lack of professional gallery and heritage space means we have to rig the Seaside Center each year at a major cost and time to convert. Page 29 to 30. In addition to the partnerships previously mentioned, we also partnered with the Sunshine Coast Arts Council and Center, Steve Wright at the Sound, and our media and marketing partners, including Coast Reporter, Coast Cable, Coast 91.7 FM, Coast Mountain FM, the Coast Cultural Alliance, and the Sunshine Coast Art Crawl. Page 31. Once again, the festival will be able to be presenting a balanced budget at the end of the year. Some of you may have noticed, if you had a look at that budget, that some of the items have shifted, although the total is the same from the proposal budget and from previous years, particularly towards contract production. This is not that we spent any differently really from previous years, but that Siobhan and I changed where we were allocating various crew, production staff, and services to better align with DOS budgeting and reporting practices. We achieved our 2019 fundraising goals and earned revenue goals. That's ticket sales mainly. Grant funding was slightly higher. Expenses were on budget. Donations were down slightly this year, possibly due to the amount of competitive fundraising for other community events and possibly for the timing of the federal election. And finally, page 34, looking forward to concepts for upcoming years. We're playing with the theme of 2020 vision. We're planning to invite visual artists to engage in a special heritage project to produce original paintings or professional photos of some of the over 150 homes built in the district pre-1930s. We're looking into funding for a short film profiling Sechelt and other First Nations artists in the community who are taking innovative and bold steps to advance their personal art and culture. And the finished project would be presented along with 2 or 3 select local filmmakers with finished and ready to launch doc films for a special film screening event at the Ravenscry Theatre. 2020 also happens to be the 100th birthday of jazz icon Dave Brubeck. There are going to be celebrations of his music all over the world next year. I have been talking to his son, local musician Dan Brubeck, about the possibility of a retrospective on his dad's music, done especially for the Sunshine Coast, subject to what Dan's world tour looks like next year. So we have to talk about that. We're also exploring a number of futuristic digital art forms with Coast Streaming and other people, visual and auditory, that we want to nurture in the future. But that's for future years as we look forward to our 3rd year of our mandate to produce the festival in 2021. And I want to thank the District of Sechelt for that multi-year mandate, which makes planning these larger, more in-depth projects feasible, as well as for the core funding for the festival, which allowed us to attract an additional $78,000, almost all of which got spent in our community.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions? Councillor McLean.
Less of a question, more of a comment. Yeah, I heard really great things about the festival this year as usual. So thank you to you, Diana, Siobhan, and the whole team, and everyone that helped make it happen. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
On your looking forward section, a couple things really stood out to me that I think are exciting, and I'm looking forward to seeing them. One is the looking back to look forward. I think the Two Helens exhibit is a great way to really showcase our history, and this could potentially be another one. So bringing that history and culture together and presenting it to the community is really great. So looking forward to that. And then another one that excites me is a more permanent paint by mural exhibition. I'm glad that Troy Bay Mall may be willing to portray the one that they did this year. That's great to see that stay in the community. And other longer lasting things that come from this festival, I think, are appreciated in my mind. So thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
Any other comments, questions? I'm going to have you turn to page 27. So one of the comments you make under funding is, you say grant funding opportunities through the District of Sechelt are limited because the festival is not yet an independent charitable nonprofit. I think this is something that's kind of been bantered around or mentioned for a number of years. Mm-hmm. It might be something, like, might be time to actually explore that a little further and see where that should go.
I believe there was, I think there was a couple of documents produced when we looked at this a few years back. It's a complicated issue. There are pros and cons, of course, but we would be happy to walk down that road again if we want to again look at the possibility of starting a nonprofit to run this festival rather than having it as a municipal festival.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, there'd have to be more pros than cons in order to have that happen.
Correct.
Yes. And then the next one about the venues. So I understand the limitations. The size does not allow for you don't have as big an audience as you could have for some of these, and it requires moving equipment a lot. It's very hard on the volunteers and the staff who put these together. So yeah, you say that depending on programming, it's clear we could accommodate a larger professional performance space. So we'll have to see what we can do about pursuing that.
Yeah, a highly adaptable, larger theater would just mean that we could both bring, acts from off coast that can't come here now because of the small audience size, but also produce our own shows, which of course is Sechelt Arts Festivals. We're more involved in producing our own shows, but definitely that would help in a number of ways.
I have to say, I attended a number of the various events this year. I think I think I attended all three of the main stage events, and then some of the others as well. Always my favorite is the heritage. I mean, it brings up so many different unique views back over where we were and where we've come, and particularly the two Helens was very evocative. And there was one picture in there that on opening night it showed an elderly Native man and woman, and I forget the fellow's name. One of the drummers, young fellow. He happened to be standing there beside me, and he
Landon.
said, Landon, that's right. He said, I know those two. He said, I know who they are. He said they were elderly people in our community, and they were at a place where they were physically challenged. They had difficulty moving, and a fire broke out in their house, and they died in the fire. So he said, I don't remember their names, but they are, a historical couple in our community. And then we stopped in at during the art crawl, then we stopped in at the museum, and Rachel knew who they were, so she told me a little bit more about them. So they are actually members of the community who have relatives here, and so that it brings it all to life a lot more. So I really enjoy those pictures.
Well, certainly the two Helens were an amazing couple of pioneers here who did some incredible work archiving and photographing the early days, and it was great to see the work of the two of them together. It was amazing.
Well, thank you for what you do, and we look forward to what you bring us next year.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we have a proclamation. We have a couple of proclamations. First one is for Adoption Awareness Month for November 2019. Whereas adoptive families in British Columbia provide children with the love and support of a permanent family, and whereas the District of Sechelt wishes to recognize the care, compassion, and unselfish commitment of British Columbia adoptive families, and whereas there continues to be a need for adoptive families to nurture the growth and development of children, especially those with special needs because of physical, mental, or emotional disabilities, and whereas the provincial government is committed to better understanding and supporting Indigenous communities in raising their children according to their traditional customs and practices, and whereas there is a need to remind citizens during this time that there are many children, teens, and sibling groups in the province who are waiting for adoption, now therefore I, Darnelda Seegers, on behalf of the District of Sechelt Council, do hereby proclaim that November 2019 shall be known as Adoption Awareness Month in the District of Sechelt. And then we have a proclamation with regards to Restorative Justice Week, November 17th through 24th, 2019. Whereas in the face of crime or conflict, restorative justice offers a philosophy and approach that views these matters principally as harm done to people and relationships, and whereas restorative justice is a non-adversarial, non-retributive approach to justice that emphasizes healing in victims, accountability of offenders, and the involvement of citizens in creating healthier, safer communities. And whereas Restorative Justice Week is an opportunity to learn about restorative justice, educate and celebrate along with other communities across the country during the week. Now therefore, I, Darnelda Seegers, on behalf of the District of Sechelt Council, do hereby proclaim that the week of November 17th through 24th, 2019 shall be known as Restorative Justice Week in the District of Sechelt. Thank you. And we'll move on to item 5.1, minutes of the regular council meeting of Wednesday, November 6th. And I'd look for a motion to adopt. Moved, seconded. Any errors or omissions in those minutes? All those in favor of adoption? Thank you. And minutes of the 3:30 regular council meeting of Wednesday, November 13th. Motion to adopt, moved, seconded, all in favor? Thank you. There's not much there to be looked at. And any business arising from the minutes? Okay, we'll move on to minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting. This is of November 13th, 2019, and a motion to adopt, moved and seconded. I wanted to point out what recommendation number 3. I'm not pulling it out, but I just want to note that this was that we recommended that we allocate $1,350 in the 2020 budget to cover the expense of temporarily relocating some or all of the community archives collection into storage, and that we recommend that we identify the goal of finding a new permanent home for the community archives as a priority for the district of Sechelt. All right. Yes, comment?
I know there was some confusion in talking to people about the Sechelt Municipal Archives versus the community archives, and this is the Helen Daw collection and the expanded archives that have derived from that, not the municipal archives.
That's correct. It is not the municipal archives. It is these are the archives that are stored in the library, not ours. Any other comments, questions about these minutes? Any errors or omissions? All those in favor? Thank you. Moving on to bylaws. Item 8.1A. This is the Planning and Development Procedures Amendment Bylaw 566-1, 2019. First, a motion to receive the report. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you. I'll turn it over to Andrew Allen.
Yes, thank you. This is a follow-up to the more detailed presentation, which was received by Community of the Whole earlier this fall. We recommend some amendments to the Planning and Development Procedures Bylaw 566, respecting landscaping bonds, respecting consideration of minor development permits for riparian area regulations, and respecting process for review of zoning bylaw and official community plan amendments. And tonight's recommendation is to pursue additional readings of this bylaw for second and third reading as presented. Since publication of agenda, there's been a couple of minor notes, minor comments where there could be further improvements, and I'm happy to describe those, should you wish. Thank you. First one, respecting security deposits for landscaping. So the idea is to receive a quote for the value of landscaping and receive a security deposit of up to 125% of the value of the quote to ensure works and services pursuant to the landscaping plan already are conducted, adhered to, and shown that success and performance and so forth. And we recommend maintaining a certain amount of that fund for a period of time. And in the bylaws draft, it says to maintain 100%, 110% of the funds received. But that would be 110% of the original estimate, not an additional above the 125%. So 110% of the 125 would be. So a minor amendment would be to achieve the same goal, to simplify the wording, may withhold up to 88% of the original security deposit for a period of 2 years, which would achieve the same idea, better wording.
Sorry, and which number was that? 7.10. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir. And the second one, respecting process reviews and how to consider permission to proceed and how to consider first reading, also reviewed this. And there was some inadvertent confusion respecting the difference between a permission to proceed report for a larger application and first reading for a smaller application. And in this particular instance, we've reviewed it again slightly. We recommend that an improvement here would be to delete point 9 of Schedule 1, noted on page 79 of the agenda in its entirety, and then move point 10 after point 12. So it would be a resequencing of numbers and effectively deleting present point 9, moving point 10 after point 12, and bumping 11 and 12 back in the numbering sequence. And what that does is just really firmly provide more clarity on how we would proceed with reading, with analysis, referrals, etc. And again, as described at COW last month, or the intent here is to provide some clarity, transparency on a bylaw amendment process bring it to council a little sooner in the process. Thank you.
Thank you. Question on your last point. If we move number 9, where in these would you actually indicate that referrals go out? Would that be between 11 and 12?
Yes, as a part of a staff report respecting first reading, we would
Okay.
recommend referrals.
Okay.
First reading would enable council to receive the bylaw, and should council be willing to consider, then referrals come as part of that package.
Okay. Any questions by council? Councillor Lamb?
Just with this, obviously, we're talking about a landscape bond. So, like I know for myself, like I've done a few landscape bonds, and they're for myself, like they've usually been, $10,000, $10,000 to $12,000 kind of thing, which isn't substantial. But when you get into a bigger project, it can run into a substantial amount of money. And so I'm just wondering about, you want to hold like 88% of the deposit for, 2 years. I'm just wondering, can we look at doing a better job of that? Maybe getting 50% back, once the plantings are in and everybody's agreed that the landscape architect and what you've actually done is the same. And then it's a matter of the plants growing and staying in place. It's like any development now. They cost so much money to move ahead that getting any bonding back to the developer is. I just kind of think it'd be something good for the district to get keep the monies flowing.
Thank you. An excellent point, Councillor Lamb. 7.10 says may withhold up to, and so the idea is that's the maximum parameter, and there would be 2 components: the implementation of the landscape plan and the success of the landscape plan. And we have also discussed internally about how to manage that. What we're looking to develop some practice, firm and reliable practice, a staff-related procedure on how to handle those types of instances. So, point taken, and thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Councillor Toth and then Councillor McLean.
Actually, I'm going to defer to Councillor McLean first while I formulate my thoughts.
Thank you, Councillor McLean.
So continuing on the security or landscaping security deposit, under the new wording, withhold 88%, up to 88%. Why not just 100? Going on a completely different area than Councillor Lamb, but yeah, why not the full amount withholding it?
Ultimately, as it is a bylaw, it is council discretion. That was our suggestion from staff, and there's certainly room for consideration. The premise here is we ask for a bond. Work gets done, some bond can be released, and more is held back for the promise of success of the plan. But that specific number can be changed if council desires.
Councillor McLean.
Okay, so that question was really just for my understanding. I think I am on page with Councillor Lamb in saying that a lower amount is adequate.
Councillor Toth.
I think I finally got it. I can understand the idea of wanting to keep up to a certain amount of money depending on the complexity of the plantings. I worked landscaping for a while, and I've when I was in the city, and I've seen a few projects around Sechelt that after the project has completed, they've had problems with their plantings. And you've seen them go back and you've seen them replace cedar hedging and you've seen them deal with knotweed and you've seen them deal with things that they shouldn't have necessarily had to deal with in the first place. But I suspect that's probably because they were hoping to get their money back. Whereas if they got more of their money back initially, they may be more willing to cut and run on more problematic things like knotweed.
All right, I'm going to address one. Page 78. Number 4. So currently what I've noticed is we have a list of developments that are in process. What this is saying is upon receipt of a complete application, staff will open a file and issue a receipt to the applicant. They're not considered received and active until all required submission information is received and fees paid. That means that there will be people who are currently on our list, potentially, or who think they should be on the list, who won't be on the list unless they've paid us the fee to move the project forward. So that may change some of the information we put out to the community. I think it's a good thing. One more thing I'm going to point out, and then we'll come back to you, Councillor McLean. Number 8.4 on page 77. So I'm just questioning this one. It says if an amendment affects more than 10 properties owned by 10 or more persons, the notification process will include notice in the newspaper as per section 8.3 rather than delivered notice. So if it's a large area, my concern is if we have people who own property, but it's maybe their summer residence or they only come in up on weekends, they may or may not actually see this because they don't actually get something in writing indicating that. So how do we, like, what is the rationale behind only putting it in the newspaper if it is a larger number of properties?
That's a great question. That rationale does come directly from Local Government Act, and I think the intent there ultimately is just manageability. If we changed for example, more recent bylaw amendment applications respecting cannabis and retail and production, it could be hundreds of properties in the district to which it applies, and to send somebody to each of those doors to notify can be excessive, as opposed to a singular property subject of a rezoning, and then we do a notification radius of, let's say, 100 meters. So it's to manage that. I have had in the past experience where been directed by elected officials to say, look, this is an important project. We think we should go above and beyond in this case, but this would be our standard procedure. Thank you.
Okay, and 8.8 actually addresses the point you just talked about, where we or you could define an expanded notification area or notice of development application. So we could actually say, in this case, yes, you need to mail it to everybody or, expand the area. Okay.
That's correct, yes.
Thank you. Councillor McLean.
Yeah, just going back to the point regarding when an application comes on as a development, that's a public accountability tool and public information. So once it gets on our books, the public can see it. So I think it is good that we have stuff out there, but I think as written it's clear. It's a concrete line. So yeah, I'd like to leave it as is.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? So this is before us for potentially first, second, and third readings. And there are a few amendments that we're looking at with regards to this. What would council like to do? Are you comfortable, this is to the director, are you comfortable with us making those amendments on the fly? Or should we do first reading, have you make the amendments and bring them back for second and third?
Yeah, that would be fine as well. It might provide a little more clarity and transparency moving forward, particularly when we're looking back on the record potentially 2 years from now and wondering how things did happen. So yes, I'm fine with that. Thank you.
Okay, so look for first reading as amended, and we'll make the amendments in the bylaw when we get to that. Yeah, corporate officer?
Actually, Your Worship, it would be first reading because we haven't actually implemented the amendment. So with listening to what you're saying, you could even give it first and second reading and refer it back to staff for amendments, and then it would come back third, and then you could read it third as amended and go on with adoption, actually.
Thank you. That works, okay. So what would council like to do? Councilor McLean, what?
Yeah, I'd like to move first and second reading as written.
Okay, thank you. Seconded? All those in favor? And then we want a motion to refer it back to staff after second for amendments. And who would like to make that motion? I'll do that. And second? All those in favor? Thank you. Okay, so let's go give it first and second reading. Okay, hang on, I can find the beginning of it here. Sorry, it's moving really. Sorry, I have to find my page. 75, thank you. There we go, okay. So page 75, 8.1B, this is a bylaw number 566-1, 2019, a bylaw to amend the District of Sechelt Planning and Development Procedures bylaw number 566, 2018. And I'd look for first reading, or move first reading. Second, all in favor? Thank you. And second reading, moved and seconded, all in favor? Thank you. And then that'll go back to staff for review. Councillor McLean.
Yeah, I'd just like to give staff a little more clarity on the amount of the refund as discussed. The 88%. Yeah, I'd rather just round that to either 90 would make sense, but I would like to bring it down a little bit. So I'd like to suggest that it is 80%. I'm going to go with 80 for now. If you want to.
You're making a motion that it be 80?
Yes.
Okay, and you're seconding that? Okay, and our staff okay with that? Absolutely. Okay, all in favor? Thank you. Well, they're the ones who have to manage it, right? And it has to be sufficient to ensure that the work that is to be done gets done, right? So, all right. Item 8.2A, Community Works Fund Reserve, motion to receive the report. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you. And
Thank
Mr.
you, Your
Douglas.
Worship. This is really a housekeeping report. We receive annually about $465,000 from our gas tax contribution through agreement with the UBCM. Through the federal gas tax agreement, this year was double that amount of money. However, the funds sits in a reserve account, which is kind of held within our surplus area. And although it's presented on our financial statements correctly, and we operate the fund correctly, it really should be in a statutory reserve. And so that's really the recommendation, is to move it from a reserve account into a statutory reserve. These funds are restricted in what they can be used for, and we have to report annually on any of the use of the funds. We've been doing that. Everything's been operating correctly. I've included an attachment. It just kind of shows you what kind of projects that the funds can be used for. And the reserve, just in the reserve, it says that these are the projects that the funds can be used for. So it's really housekeeping.
Thank you. Councillor Toth.
Just a question for the director. It's going to list this schedule as is, or is it making reference to a UBCM schedule? Okay, so if that UBCM schedule changes, we don't have to amend anything here. Thank you.
Correct. Yeah.
Any other questions? So there's a recommendation that we give 3 readings to the Community Works Fund Reserve Bylaw number 588, 2019. Someone like to move that? Moved and seconded? All in favor? Thank you. So let's move to the bylaw. It's on page 87, bylaw number 588, 2019, a bylaw to establish a reserve fund for the receipt of federal gas tax funds under the Community Works Fund Agreement for the District of Sechelt. And who would like to move first reading? Moved and seconded, all in favor? Thank you. And second reading? Moved and seconded, all in favor? And third reading? Moved and seconded, all in favor? Thank you. So we'll move on to new business. So this was handed out, and I referred to this at the beginning. So there are 2 resolutions that came to us from the regional district. Recommendation number 2 from November 14th, 2019 meeting reads that a 5-year 2020 to 2024 memorandum of understanding service agreement be negotiated with the Sechelt Public Library Association, and that this recommendation be forwarded to the Sechelt Indian Government District, the District of Sechelt Council, and the Sechelt Public Library Board for approval to enter negotiations for the Sechelt Public Library MOU/service agreement. So we need to just accept and adopt this recommendation at this time. Any questions or comments? Councillor McLean.
Just starting on the MOU discussion, could you help me understand why is this an MOU and not a service?
It actually is, why is it an MOU and not a service of the regional district? Okay, so if it's a service of the regional district, then we would actually fund through the regional district, and the library would go to the regional district and be funded in one place by all the funders. At this point, we pay separately, the Sechelt Indian Government District pays separately, and the SCRD pays separately. So it has to be, in order for all of us to fund at this point, it needs to be a memorandum of understanding with an attached service agreement indicating the types of services that they will be providing. They have talked about, one of the conversations that has happened at the regional district is around a service agreement, a service function at the regional district. That would require us to go out to AAP or referendum to the community to actually have them adopt something like that. Currently, the way it's set up is each of the electoral areas has their own bylaw that they've gone out to their own residents for to approve funding. So they can fund up to the dollar amount as stipulated in the bylaw for the library, and we fund out of our budget. So it can go up and down depending on what we choose. What the MOU would do, as you know, the next recommendation we'll be looking at, the MOU would actually have how we determine what those amounts are. And then based on that, once the budget comes forward, each of the funders actually has to approve the budget amount this year, and then that as well would be looked at inside of the MOU. So the library, one of the things we're looking at is what kind of percentage increase do they need each year in order to maintain the service levels that we're requesting they provide. Given that they have union negotiations coming up and those kinds of things, cost increases for books, etc. So that's part of what will happen inside of the MOU conversation. If we get the first number set up this year, then we'll be good for a year, and we'll have that time frame to actually set up the MOU. Because that's the base, right? The base that we set up this year will be the base that the MOU will start from. And then each year after that, it would look at a percentage increase of some sort based on that base that was determined. Okay?
Thank you.
All right. So first recommendation is that we enter in negotiations for the Sechelt Public Library MOU/service agreement. With that recommendation? Is there a seconder for that recommendation? Seconded. Any other discussion or comments? All those in favor? Thank you. And the second recommendation This is what was passed at the regional district. That staff report to the next Corporate and Administrative Services Committee meeting with funding allocation options for the Sechelt Public Library based on estimated percentage of population served, using 33% for electoral area A, 100% for electoral area B, 100% for District of Sechelt, and 50% for electoral area D, and considerations of existing service bylaws by area, and that the Sechelt Indian Government District be consulted as to an agreeable percentage of population served contribution based on the proposed change for suggested percentage contributions. Okay, so I'm going to talk about electoral area D first, and then we'll talk about electoral area A, so where these numbers came from. Electoral area D funds both the Gibson's Public Library and the Sechelt Library. And so they split their proportion 50% to Sechelt and 50% to Gibson's. And so what they're saying here is that 50% of their population would be the base for determining how much they'd pay to the library. For electoral area A, the province actually looks at some of the population as being served and some of the population being unserved in electoral area A. The 33%, we don't really know how the province determines their number, but this was a number that electoral area A was comfortable with putting forward, given that they've only been part of this function for the last few years. They haven't been part of the function. They've been paying into it, but not from a service bylaw. They actually paid into it through grant in aid up until only a few years ago. And we had to actually get the service bylaw, the function actually established. That happened, like I say, just a few years ago. So this is the percentage that they were looking at. And I think Councillor McLean has some comments to make on this.
Thank you. So I'm against Area A not paying a fair share. I understand that they're further away, but that doesn't justify paying less fees to the library. Area A paying 1/3 per capita than what we pay and what Area B pays is it signifies that they don't value the library as much as other areas. And I don't think this is true. I think they do value the library in Area A. I would prefer that Area A and the SCRD work with the Sechelt Library to determine how that area can be better served by the library and recognize the cost of doing those outreach services to Area A. So to that end, I'd like to propose that Area A fund 100% per capita, just as Area B and the District of Sechelt are doing.
Okay, one other point that I neglected to mention was electoral area A and electoral area D also fund reading rooms in their area. So some of the funds, and they only fund those, no other area actually funds them. Yes, our library does support them, but that is a portion as well. Any comments?
Yeah, as I said on the library board, I was going to add in the Pender Harbor Reading Room. The Sechelt Public Library does provide a fair amount of supplemental service to the Pender Harbor Reading Room. They pay for their internet connection up there. They provide reading material transport to and from the reading room on a fairly regular basis. Just reading your motion here, I think that additional projects for the library to take on in Area A specifically, but not other areas, could be fairly cost prohibitive based on the distance and the staff time required to accommodate programs that far out. So I just wanted to make that comment.
It would have a cost, but it's doable. Like you said, the library is currently supporting the reading room. But to say that we're only supporting it 33% of what they're doing here, it's just not fair. It's not fair to everyone else funding the library. The library benefits everyone, and everyone should be paying equally into the library.
Okay, in the statement, just before your last one there, and in the original one that's brought forward, it says, and considerations of existing service bylaws by area. When Area A set up their service bylaw, they actually funded it fairly low. So I can tell you that if you do 100% for electoral area A, you will not get 100% for electoral area A, because it will be limited by the service bylaw for that area.
I think what I would like District of Sechelt Council to say is that this is not fair. We can then bring it back to the SCRD, and they can figure out what they need to do to make it more fair. Do they need to modify that bylaw? I would like us to say that they do, but that's not our decision to make. That's an SCRD decision to make. I would like to simply recommend to them that they do look at that, and if it does not fit in within the bylaw, that they change that bylaw.
Okay, so I don't know how to put this into our minutes, given that this was the recommendation that came forward, but that's not the recommendation we want to adopt. Councillor McLean?
I believe we don't have anything on the table currently. Okay, so I am going to read off a motion which I have provided to the district, to everyone at the table here. So whereas public libraries benefit every resident of the Sunshine Coast and should be funded equitably. And whereas the physical distance to Area A can be overcome through digital technologies, off-site programming, and other activities. Be it resolved that the District of Sechelt Council supports in principle funding the Sechelt Library based on an estimated percentage of the population served, using 100% for electoral area A, 100% for electoral area B, 100% for the District of Sechelt, and 50% for electoral area D, and considerations of existing bylaws or existing service bylaws by area. Be it further resolved that Sechelt Council requests that the Sechelt Public Library provide potential projects to better serve electoral area A and cost estimates for those projects.
Okay, is there a seconder for that motion to put it on the table? Councillor Toth. And who would like to speak to that?
I'm all for making Pender Harbor pay more. But I'm actually going to propose an amendment to your amendment. I'm going to propose striking that last, and that Sechelt Council requests that the Sechelt Public Library provide potential projects to better serve electoral area A and cost estimates for those projects. I don't think that's our
Before you
prerogative.
do that, let's get a second. He'll second that, okay. I'll speak to that.
I don't think that's our prerogative.
Thank you. Okay, so maybe we'd like to speak to the amendment.
His amendment?
Yes, his amendment.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I think leaving that statement in can just open a whole can of worms that I think we need to get the basics sorted out here before we suggest that they look at expanding programs anywhere.
Mr. McLean?
So what we've heard so far is that Pender Harbor feels underserved and that they shouldn't be paying as much. I want to address that. I want to say that we should better serve Pender Harbor through the Sechelt Library. And recognize that there may be cost to doing that. And we don't know the cost. The people who will best know the cost and best know the potential projects are the Sechelt Library. So if they can come forward, it may increase our budget a little bit, but at least we know what we could do to better serve Pender Harbor.
I agree with Councillor Toth, though. I think that's between the library and the people of Pender Harbor, and there actually are people from Pender Harbor on the library board. So I know that they will serve Pender Harbor, and we don't need to tell them this. They know how to do that, and they will. They're providing as much, they're providing service within the staffing model that they have. And part of what we're looking at addressing through some of this funding is actually the staffing model so they can provide more service. Any other comments on the amendment first? Well, the amendment to the motion. There's only a motion on the floor with an amendment. Okay. Okay, so let's vote on the amendment first. All those in favor of the amendment to delete that last clause? Any opposed? And would you like that recorded? Sure. Okay. So we have an amended motion in front of us. So it's the motion without the last clause that the Sechelt Library provide potential projects to better serve electoral area A. So it's everything but that. Councillor Toth.
I'm sorry to our corporate officer. I'd like to propose an amendment to put the last paragraph of the original recommendation back in. And that the Sechelt Indian Government District be consulted as to an agreeable percentage of population served contribution based on the proposed change for suggested percentages.
Okay, seconded. Okay, so we've got an amendment to that. You've got that? Okay. Okay, so the amendment is that, where are we at? Back to this page. And that the Sechelt Indian Government District be consulted as to an agreeable percentage of population served contribution based on the proposed change for the suggested percentage contributions.
Just adding this back.
Yes, writing that back in. Okay? Yep. Yes, from the first one. Yep. Okay, is everybody clear what we're talking about? And you moved that. Did we have a seconder for that? Yes. Yes, we did. Okay. Any other comments on that piece? All those in favor of the amendment? Thank you. Okay, so we have an amended motion. So let's see if I can do this motion. Whereas public libraries benefit every resident of the Sunshine Coast and should be funded equitably, and whereas the physical distance to electoral area A can be overcome through digital techniques, offsite programming, and other activities, that the District of Sechelt supports in principle funding Sechelt Public Library based on estimated percentage of population served using 100% for electoral area A, 100% for electoral area B, 100% for District of Sechelt, and 50% for electoral area D, and considerations of existing service bylaws by area, and that the Sechelt Indian Government District be consulted as to an agreeable percentage of population served contribution based on the proposed change for suggested percentage contributions. Any questions? All those in favor? Thank you. Okay, and this could go, we do not have to wait until the next council meeting to forward this on to the regional district, or do we need to make a motion to that effect?
Your worship, no, you don't, because in essence, council's two representatives on the board will vote the way you will vote. This has been guidance to your representatives, so you don't have to wait. You can take it and take the advice of your council to your board meeting.
Thank you. Okay, so, yes, item 10.1. This is 2020 funding for police-based victim services. First, a motion to receive the report. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you. Ms. Smith.
Thank you. And I would just like to let council know that we have Denise Woodley, who's the Director of Programs for Sunshine Coast Community Services, in our audience this evening. So before you is a report requesting council's approval to change the way that we provide funding on an annual basis to police-based victim services. As outlined in this report, police-based victim services is a program of that's managed by the province. And as you can see on the last page of this report, in the attachment there, it identifies that the province does expect that at minimum municipalities provide 50% funding for these programs. So staff are recommending that rather than have the program apply to us for a grant every year and have our grant committee adjudicate this, that instead we bring this program into our annual budgeting process. So at the same time that we're budgeting services such as RCMP, we are also budgeting for this program. We will be able to have the funding amounts that is committed from the province for staff to work with in order to know what is going to be needed for the program for that year.
Did you want to address that?
Yeah, this report is really about a change in practice. So right now we're not asking for any new money or any money at all. It's just the practice of, instead of pushing it through the grants program, that we're going to include it in as a line in and around the RCMP budget area.
So how would the reporting from the organization actually change? I know they wouldn't apply to the CIP program, but would we still require them to provide any kind of financials to us.
I'm not so sure. We can actually set it up any way we would like. We want to have continued information the way we get it, or more program-specific information would be good. We also have a little bit more information from the province when we go through it in the budget process. But essentially, we'd be shifting the funds that we put into the grant program for this. We would shift that over to a line item in the budget. And then council will get to know what really the ask is from there as to whether you agree to lift it to what the province would like to see or not.
Councillor McLean?
Yeah, I think the mayor brings up a good point about the accountability. Off the top of my head, I can think of one other organization that we fund through a line item, and that's the library. Funny enough. I don't know if we have any more. Maybe the Director of Finance can speak to that, if he's aware of any other organizations that we fund through a line item, or anyone else.
Off the top of my head, I can't. But no, we can have them annually report back, bring their financials, and provide a lot of the information that they're providing within the grants program at this point.
I think the difference with this program too is that this is one where the province expects municipalities to contribute 50% of the funding. So unlike other programs that at times in the past have had line item funding, this is one where it's expected that our municipality will provide the other 50% of the program.
Councillor Kuster?
Have we not been funding 50% through the grants?
No.
Okay. What kind of percentage would it be?
We are very close. Part of the complicating factor here is that similar to RCMP, this is a service that provides services to the entire Sunshine Coast. The province simply expects local governments to provide their 50%. It has been left up to Sunshine Coast Community Services to do that legwork of asking every local government to put in their portion. They have been going to Town of Gibsons and SCRD and Sechelt Nation to ask for grant and aid support. It has not been anywhere near the amount that would allow it to come up to a full 50% complement to the provincial amount. So it is worded similar to RCMP, where a municipality with a population of 5,000 or more and a RCMP staffing of at least four sergeants, that's when they expect the municipalities to kick in. So if other municipalities are going to be kicking in a portion, that would be separate to this conversation. But at this time, we've been getting close to the 50%.
Councillor McLean?
So where does the rest come from?
They make do without. They don't actually get the full 50% that the province would like them to have.
But follow-up question to that, and I'll come to you. Follow-up question to that, if they only require that from municipalities of 5,000 or greater, who puts in the portion for smaller municipalities? Because, I mean, they can't come to us really and ask for 50% of all of it for the Sunshine Coast, because that's not our responsibility. So where does the other portion come from?
It's a bit of a tricky situation for us on the Sunshine Coast. When I have spoken with the province about that, they do identify portions of the funding that they provide to this program as being for Gibsons and for the other communities. But they recognize that the other communities here don't meet that minimum of the 5,000 population. So we're sort of in a difficult situation where we don't have a very clear way to address that at this time. And we have been funding to the best of our ability, and the program has been running to the best of its ability with the amount that they're provided.
Okay, Mr. Douglas, I have a meeting down with the RCMP in the next couple of weeks. Perhaps you could make a note that this is something I'll need to bring up down there.
Certainly.
Yes, I understand what you're saying. And if we look at the RCMP themselves, we fund 11 of 35 members or something. The rest get funded by the province. So there needs to be a further contribution by the province.
As far as the province, and Denise, please correct me if I'm wrong here. As far as the province is concerned, they are funding their 50% of the entire Sunshine Coast. The challenge then is that forces the service provider, which is at this time Sunshine Coast Community Services, to then have to go to each of those local municipalities and ask for a portion. They have been successful in the past at receiving grant and aids from most of the municipalities here, and that is effectively what they're doing with us as well, is going through the grant program. The amounts that they are being granted from the other local governments are not quite at that. They're
I think that they see where the RCMP budget goes to, and they've really in the past funded, 1,000 here, 1,000 there. Where we did put in a new 3 years because standing grants come up, which has been, I would say, a key to this program running smoothly over the last 3 years is knowing what we were getting from the District of Sechelt. The services, if you see in the interim report for the last year, we've gone up 100% over the Sunshine Coast referrals and 200% for the District of Sechelt, the services that we've provided over the last year. We did ask for a significant increase to the first of the next 3 years to try to secure, really it's more a second staff person, more hours to be able to provide the services to the whole Sunshine Coast.
So you'll be doing a presentation to the regional district and the town of Gibsons and the Sechelt Nation, probably the beginning of December for the SCRD?
The thing is,
Maybe you should come to the microphone so that this can be, thanks.
the district of Gibsons, the town of Gibsons in the last year basically started cutting out the funding that they were giving to us. Now it's a new council. We haven't actually applied. They gave us $500. So the time and energy to try to write a grant for $500 where they didn't, when the last time when we tried to explain what the services are for, they just don't see it as in their area. So, and the same with the Sunshine Coast Regional District.
Councilor McLean?
It was frustrating, right?
Yes.
So,
Okay, so there's some work to be done.
yeah.
Okay, okay, who's first? Councilor Rowe, Councilor Kuster, Councilor McLean.
Matt and I spent the last 3 days together, and I've been ranting a bit about inequity. So he's probably tired, but just to be clear, we got $75,000 from the provincial government, so they're expecting the government.
70,000 was the last year, and it'll probably be like a 2%. We were expecting, and I talked to the province last week, we were expecting what we were supposed to get from them this year, but I would say that the increase might only be from 70,000, 2% at the most, really.
Okay, so then the expectation would be that the local governments would be putting in 70,000.
Yeah.
Just to be clear. And we're putting in 40-odd thousand.
Yeah, and I asked for the next round to be around 56,000
Right.
in the next 3-year grant.
And then we're getting 500 and 400 from the other governments. And so community services is making up that difference then?
So, no.
Okay.
We're not making up that difference. We are providing the best service possible. And this program has developed like in this region and as population grows and as the needs grow. And it is the law for any victim in anywhere in this province to be offered victim services. So a couple of things have happened in the last couple of years where our numbers have gone up as far as the people that we're serving. One is the police, the RCMP have been more diligent in offering those services, and people have reached out to get those services. And because it's up to that person once they're offered it to actually use the service. So, and there's just been sort of lots of things that have happened on the Sunshine Coast that police-based victim service become involved with. That is missing persons, next of kin notifications, airplane crashes, all those sorts of things, as well as talking to a senior who's been a victim of phone fraud. So it's a wide variety of services, and the increase has happened. And so I would say the last 2 years has seen a significant jump in the uptake of these services, which is good for our community, but is wearing our 1.5 workers out to cover all that.
Okay, can we talk offline?
Sure.
Thanks. Councillor McLean, no, you were it. Councillor Kuster was next.
Go ahead, Matt.
Coun-
What are you going to say?
Say it. So this stems from a discussion Councillor Rowe and I had. I want to give you credit. This is a regional service. Why should everything be put on the District of Sechelt? And I understand why the other governments are not funding it. Because the process for grants that they have is for each specific area. Like, this isn't for a specific area. So I totally understand that they're not funding this because that's not how their grant system is set up. What we need is a new SCRD service for police-based victim services. And fund it regionally. The District of Sechelt will pay our fair share through that, but it also means that all the other areas are paying as well, because there is nothing Sechelt about this. This is a regional issue. It's a regional service. It should be funded by a regional district.
Councillor Kuster.
I have to agree with Matt, like 100%. I am just like floored that the whole community or the whole regional district would expect that the District of Sechelt taxpayers would have to take on the burden of this when the service is so important, don't get me wrong, but this is a need for that everyone uses, and it's so important, and I'm actually just can't believe that that's how it's operating right now.
So we need to have a conversation. I chair the Corporate and Administrative Services Committee at the Regional District, which is the budget. So I understand how they could fund this. It needs to come in upfront, and then they can actually tax for sufficient grant and aid to be able to fund you to the level that you need to be funded. They can do that. If we set it up as a regional function, we have to go to the whole Sunshine Coast and do an AAP to be able to actually raise the taxes to be able to fund it. So it can be done. There needs to be some understanding at the regional district and with the town of Gibsons to what it is they're funding to make sure that they raise the taxes to be able to provide the service. We can make that happen. Councillor Toth.
I like Councillor McLean's suggestion about turning this into a regional service. And if that means it has to go through the AAP and all that to be set up as a service function, I think that's a conversation that needs to happen. That conversation can't be held in time for this coming year. AAP process is multi-months long, 6 months, something like that for a new service. Budgeting, things like that. So I would be in favor of moving recommendation 2 for this year to get it funded as best as we can for this year. But I'd like to make another recommendation, 2, I suppose, and that would be that staff forward this RFD and Victim Services Program information to the Town of Gibson's Policing Services Committee for information to feed into their transition into paying for policing services when they pass 5,000 population. Because that's going to be coming up for them as well, and they may or may not have that on their radar in case the SCRD side of things doesn't go. I'd also like to make another recommendation that this be forwarded to the Sunshine Coast Regional District with the express intention of looking into starting a new regional service to support this program properly.
Okay, so you're gonna second both amendments? Oh, there is no motion at this point on the floor. You've just put that on the floor. Recommendation 2 with the 2 additions. Okay? Counselor Toth, Counselor Kuster, sorry, and then Counselor Lamb? No, Counselor Kuster.
I just have a question. Were you saying there is a way to get this funded this year? When you were just saying that? Clarification, please.
Yes,
So why wouldn't we look at that?
we will, but what he's looking at is for future years.
Oh, of course.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you. Okay, any questions about the motion? Yes,
I can also say that the province expects twice a year financials from our organization to report out. So those sorts of reporting, and we do, so we can do and we can set up any reporting that's necessary. Just I wanted to let you know that.
okay, so you weren't at the microphone, so I'll just repeat it for everybody. So it's that the province requires you to report twice a year to them with your financials, and that we can set up any kind of reporting to suit our needs to make sure that we have sufficient. Yeah. Okay, thanks. Okay, so there's a recommendation on the floor. I don't know if I can repeat it all. The first part is that council fund police-based victim service program as a line item within the 2020 RCMP budget area instead of through the community investment program grant process. And you have, okay, could you read that to us?
Might need a little tweaking, but
That's
I think
fine.
you have it.
That staff forward this RFD to Town of Gibson's Policing Services Committee to consider once they meet the 5,000 resident threshold, in case that the SCRD does not move it forward, and that this be forwarded to SCRD with the express intention of looking into starting a new regional service to support this initiative.
Very good. Okay, any other comments? It's been seconded. It's been seconded, yes? No? Okay, yes. Okay, it's been seconded. Any other questions or comments on the motion on the floor? All those in favor? Thank you. There's also one more, number 3 here. The council directs staff to review on an annual basis the Sunshine Coast Community Services request for police-based victim services at the same time as the annual RCMP budget request.
So moved.
Councillor McLean, moved, seconded, all in favor? Thank you. All right. We have one more item on here. Item 10.2, consideration of cannabis retail store license applications. Motion to receive the report. Moved and seconded, all in favor? Thank you. And over to you.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So this report in front of you today is for consideration of 4 cannabis retail license applications that the District of Sechelt has received from the province through the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch. I'll just go over some of the policies that are in place right now and the process that we would be going through and what's informing this process. In April of 2019, Council adopted a cannabis retail policy that was intended to reform or inform these types of applications, how they would be handled and processed, what sort of considerations would go into approval of an application. The retail policy also informed subsequent bylaw amendments that were completed in September of this year. So this was the starting point for it. The retail policy essentially laid out evaluation criteria, locational criteria for where cannabis stores can be. It laid out a maximum of 6 stores that the District of Sechelt could support, with the sort of 2 location option of 5 being downtown or 2 in Wilson Creek, but an overall maximum of 6 stores. It also laid out a notification process that's required. So all property owners within 100 meters of every retail location were notified, as well as a notification posted in the Coast Reporter as well. Direct notification was also given to the RCMP, the SDBA, and the school district. So subsequently, we've adopted amendments in the zoning bylaw to address cannabis retail stores as a permitted use. Again, being informed by the retail policy, These uses were specifically permitted in the C2 zones in the downtown area, so our downtown commercial area, as well as in Wilson Creek, which is essentially the IGA Mall area. It also provided regulations for locational criteria adjacent to schools, 150 meters from public elementary schools and secondary schools, as well as specifically an exception was made for 50 meters from the alternative school on Inlet Road due to its close proximity to the downtown core. And odor control systems are also required in all cannabis retail locations. So the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch is the regulator of cannabis retail in British Columbia. They vet all applicants for financial history, security history, and whatnot. They're required to send a referral to the local government. We can, or if we choose not to respond, we can not respond, and the application would end at that point. But the province does require a positive recommendation from the local government before issuing any licenses. Even if we do send a positive recommendation, the LCRB could still, for whatever reasons they determine, choose to deny the application. So the cannabis retail policy also lays out some considerations for denying an application. Those are strong community opposition to a particular location. If the proposed location is in the wrong OCP designation, in the wrong zone, too close to a school, or if we're exceeding the number of 6 existing licenses, at that time council could decide to not respond or deny the recommendation. All of these currently proposed recommendations meet these criteria. We did receive 28 responses in total from our notification efforts. Most of them, 19 of them, were in favor in one way or another of either particular locations or cannabis retail in general. 8 of those were in opposition. Most of them had to do with the location at Torito and Inlet and being in close proximity to the Watermark residential condominiums there. And the school district did reiterate their preferred approach of 300-meter distance from any school. So the first application is for Coastal Green. They'd be located at Sunshine Coast and Field Road at the IGA complex. Again, located in a commercial zone in the appropriate OCP designation. Up to 2 stores could be permitted in this area. This would be the only one, and it's well over 150 meters from any school. The 420 Hemp Shop is the location on Cowrie and close to Inlet. That's been there for a number of years. It's located also in the commercial zone, downtown center designation, within the up to 5 retail stores being permitted. 3 of the 4 that you're considering today are in the downtown area. And this is specifically the one that the accommodation was made for in the zoning bylaw for its proximity to the alternative school. As I mentioned, Suncoast Culture at Torito and Inlet. Again, similar designations to the other downtown stores. And finally, Weeds, Glass and Gifts, which is located on Wharf Avenue. Again, located in the downtown area appropriate zone. So that concludes my presentation. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer that. And those are the recommendations.
Any questions? Councillor McLean?
I noticed one of the requirements listed in the referrals from the province is that it is only, it has to be a standalone business. Does that include selling other products? Because I know some of these locations sell clothing, sell associated products with this. So is that a concern for us, or is that a concern for the province?
That would be a concern for the province. They have a strict criteria on how the retail stores operate in that regard, especially for the standalone business part of it, and what accessory retail items that they might be able to sell or not sell. I think that what they're getting at is a cannabis store within a supermarket, for example, or something like that. But they would have more detailed criteria on that.
Right, we'll leave it to them then.
So how do we deal with that, though? I mean, that was my question I was writing down here too. So we know of 2 of them for sure. who currently offer other products. So would the province indicate what they could and couldn't sell, and then they would continue to come and monitor them? We could still give them a business license, but the province would be the one who would come and say, yes, you have a license, or no, you don't. And then they would come to us and say, shut them down or not. How does that, do we know how that works yet? Has that even been ironed out yet?
The province has set up a community enforcement division through the RCMP for cannabis retail specifically, and they would deal with those enforcement issues regarding provincial regulations for that.
Councillor Toth.
I only knew of one that was selling other products, clothing and things like that. And I know that they voluntarily have stopped doing that because they wanted to make sure they weren't going to run afoul of any of the provincial regulations. So I think the province is taking the lead on that. I just wanted to highlight the odor control system requirements that are in there. One of the businesses has been around for quite a number of years. A couple of them have been around for a couple of years, and one of them's just starting up. I've heard complaints from people about odor from the properties. I'm scent sensitive, I've never noticed it, but I just wanted to highlight that there is odor control system requirement there. Violation of that would be up to us to enforce because it is within our bylaw. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor McLean?
I just want to provide a quick comment about the hours of operation. I noticed that one of the options that we could impose is reducing the hours of operations from 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. I personally have no interest in that. I think that's adequate.
Any other comments? Councillor McLean?
I just want to thank staff for going through this process. The three existing locations currently have a temporary use permit. We could have permitted them to be fully operational under that temporary use permit. I believe that's what Gibson's did. I'm glad that we created this policy, we created these bylaws first. So then we can think in a general sense and then approve based on these bylaws. So now that we have applications in front of us, they meet the bylaw, they meet the policy, and that's how good governance is done. So I'm very happy to hopefully approve all of these tonight. Sure. I will move recommendation 2 that council recommends approval of non-medical cannabis retail store license at 124330 Sunshine Coast Highway for Coastal Green. Recommendation 3 that council recommends approval of a non-medical cannabis retail license at 5670 Cowrie Street for 420 Hemp Shop. Recommendation 4 that council recommends an approval of a non-medical cannabis retail store license at 101 5670 Torito Street for Suncoast Culture Corp. And recommendation 5 that council recommends approval of a non-medical cannabis retail store license at 101 5536 Wharf Avenue for Weeds, Glass, and Gifts Limited.
And is there a seconder? Seconded. Okay, comments. I just want to make a comment around the temporary use permit piece. We actually did provide temporary use permits to the 3 facilities, and they were up and running. And it was only once the RCMP enforcement branch came and met with them and informed them that they could potentially be impacting their license application by operating when not legal by the province, that they closed down. So once that happened, staff moved this forward as quick as possible, given what we were dealing with in the community and the legislation and all of that. So I think they've done a great job in bringing this forward. I mean, we did get complaints that we were the ones who shut them down, and it wasn't us who shut them down. It was actually the province that did that, the RCMP and the province and their choice. So I think we recognize that this provides a required and needed service to our community. Councillor Toth.
Assuming that this passes, and we provide our feedback to LCRB, obviously every situation is a little bit different, but what kind of timelines can the businesses expect for approval or not from the province. Do you know?
I'm not sure about the province end of things, but I know on our side of things, we should have an answer to the province within a week or so.
The province has to look at all kinds of other things as well, too, right? Okay. Any other comments or questions about the motions in front of us? All those in favor? Thank you. That's done. It is 10 to 9. We've been sitting here for almost 2 hours. We're going to take at least a 5-minute break and come back after 5 minutes. Okay, we'll come back, and we're going to start with council reports, and we start with Councillor Lamb on that end, and we're going to move our way down the table.
There you go. Well, mine's short and sweet. I've been very busy, but haven't accomplished anything. So, and I'm saving myself for the next 10 days.
Councillor McLean, I don't know what that means. Councillor McLean, I don't know if I want to ask. Councillor McLean.
Okay. Attended a Davis Bay Wilson Creek Selma Park Community Association meeting last week. I think that's going to come up later in the discussion, so I'm not going to speak to that. Attended a Sunshine Coast Tourism AGM. A lot of their board members were re-elected, so that's a sign of a very strong board. Jack Barr is now continues to be their president, who is a hotel operator out of Powell River. And they will be releasing a visitor services strategy very soon. So I think that's a document that will be a lot of interest to us because we have a contract with them to provide the Sechelt Visitor Center. So to bring all the visitor center together in one strategy will be exciting. Last week I attended a plastics forum hosted by a wide variety of groups on the Sunshine Coast. So it's good to see everyone coming together. A few key takeaways away from that. The recycling system is not what it used to be. About 3 years ago, China stopped accepting a lot of the recyclables from Canada. So it's really changed how everyone is processing the recycling. And that's one of the big causes behind the film plastics that have become harder for consumers to recycle these days. I think my biggest takeaway from that is the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, recycle. Really, the first two are the important ones: reduce and reuse. Recycling should be our last option. The other two are much more environmentally beneficial than recycling. So reduce what we use and try and reuse stuff. Another big takeaway I had was that local governments need to do more on educating people on what can be recycled. We recently produced this guy, which is one of the first communications we've had on recycling in many, many years of operating the Blue Box program. I think that led to very high contamination rates and leading people to think that they can recycle pretty much anything in a blue bin. That's not true. There's a limited list, and there's a lot of misunderstanding about the recycling system out there today, and the organic system, and the solid waste system. So I'd like to see what we can do to further that communication that we're putting out to our citizens. And one final little note, there's a lot of biodegradable products being put out there. Biodegradable does not mean recyclable. Biodegradable means biodegradable. So what that really means is that when you get a biodegradable product, it goes into the landfill and just has less impact in the landfill. So those single-use items, we should still be trying to reduce our use of them. Biodegradable is not the answer either. We need to have sustainable options like the mayor's water bottle. And that's my report.
People know whose it is when I leave it places, so I get it back. Councillor Kuster.
Okay, I will keep this short and sweet. Okay, so I attended Advisory Planning Commission meeting, Housing Advisory Committee meeting, and more notable, I went to the Coast Community Building Association and Chamber Mixer, where I got to meet with builders and other stakeholders in the community and get some feedback on and hear their concerns, what's going on in the community right now. And just today we went into the community services and got to see their draft kind of drawings for the mixed housing proposal they're doing, which is aiming for 35 units of affordable housing for at-need and at-risk women on the coast. And I just thought that was an amazing thing to see, and I think it's something our community needs. So I'm looking forward to seeing this moving forward. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Rowe.
Well, a few meetings that have already been spoken about. Matt and I attended the Housing Central Conference last weekend and earlier this week in Vancouver, and we had a discussion that we are going to talk to our council mates, and when we go off to a conference, we're going to see if we can organize our takeaways a bit better and share them as part of a report back to the other councillors who weren't able to attend and to the community, so that they know that their tax dollars are working well. There was a lot of great takeaways from this conference and the last one that we went to. So stay tuned, because we've only been back 24 hours, so we're not organized. And I got off the ferry last night and went straight to a meeting that the Downtown Business Association organized with regards to homeless situation in Sechelt and businesses and how it's affecting them. And there was a bunch of stakeholders there, service providers, and it was very interactive. And we've got some good plans of work ahead. I had a follow-up meeting today with the facilitator of that meeting last night, and we're discussing some possibilities of some grant applications that we can make to help serve some of the issues that were identified last night. So all in all, it's been a busy and good week, 2 weeks.
Thank you. Councillor Toth.
I don't have a specific council report, but I did actually want to touch on a couple things that the previous councils have mentioned. The community services project, they have a very aggressive timetable that they want to get this building going with. And Angela Letman, who retired from here, is volunteering with them to help that project move along. So they should be in good hands. With regards to recycling, you used to be able to recycle a lot more in the blue bins. It gets less and less convenient every year. And I know a couple of people will really harp on me if I don't mention it, but there's a lot more than 3 R's. There's also repair, repurpose, refuse. Yeah, there's a couple more in there, but I didn't think of them in time to write them down. At the SCRD, I attended a planning and community development meeting. There was a presentation from the Workforce Housing Society. They're looking to do an initial project of 30 units, and I'll be looking for support from the municipalities in terms of reduced fees, expedited permitting, that sort of thing. They would prefer to build using a modular construction due to the limited labor pool up here right now and the speed of construction with modular units. They can bring them up on trucks, crane them in place, have a building up a lot faster. They're not totally aligned with the Affordable Housing Society, but they can agree on their differences and see the potential for coordinating together in the future. We had a report from the SCRD staff recommending to leave the annual pool maintenance period in June, which was an interesting one for me because I always thought, why June? Why not May or April when we're not under watering restrictions yet? It was mentioned that the water table in May is still too high, which could result in the empty pool basin lifting out of the ground over time, causing damage to the facility. And a good example of this can actually be seen in the back parking lot at Clayton's. There's a storm sewer pipe that's in the ground there under the parking lot, and it's actually pulling the parking lot up as it lifts out of the ground. There was some discussion about the Dead Boat Society, the work that they do, and how we can best coordinate as a region, or even with other regions around the Salish Sea. We also had a discussion around youth engagement, how best to include youth in the decision-making process, especially given the daytime meetings up at the top of Field Road, which is not easily accessed by transit. Staff will be coming back with some ideas on what committees we might be able to get youth involvement on with a minimum amount of effort. Also attended a joint meeting with the Islands Trust. The biggest takeaway from that one was that they did their islands cleanup, which involved bins, barges, and SCRD staff. They collected almost 5 tons of electronics waste off the shorelines, 23 tons of municipal solid waste, 25 tons of scrap metal, and 1.4 tons of recyclable materials. They still have trouble with styrofoam disposal, as it's extremely bulky but brittle and has no viable recycling option at this time. I think the rural directors have managed to strong arm into chairing the Planning and Community Development Committee because Mayor Beamish is leaving the SCRD board and he was chairing that committee. But the committee appointments still have to come to the board for approval.
Thank you. All right, what have I done? A lot of the things that the others have mentioned, so I'll just mention a few others here. Métis Day flag raising. So last Friday, we raised the flag. It's a lot of fun all the time. The school children come over from the French school. They sang some songs. They held the flag. They stomped their feet in time with the music. It was a lot of fun. And track AGM. So I got there late. I had another session before that, but I attended the track AGM, and they've got quite a good group there. We've got some people from Sechelt, which is good. In the last number of years, we've actually had people come forward from this area. Prior to that, we didn't have any from Sechelt. It was all other regions up and down the coast. So they're looking at doing a month again this coming year. So we'll have to see what kind of challenges we can come up with there. I want to just mention the Remembrance Day celebration. I was standing beside a 96-year-old decorated hero of World War II. His name was Marcel Cruteau. He was so proud to be able to place the wreath. And then at the end of it, I took him over with me to the viewing dais because we go over a little bit further over, and then they all come by and salute. I mean, I don't get to salute because I'm not part of that, but he got to salute, and he was so proud of that. It was so nice to see him be able to be acknowledged that way. His family was with him. They helped to make sure he could actually get around. I had to slow down. I was walking too fast for him. So it was great. What else? Sunshine Coast Homelessness Advisory Committee meeting this morning. No, yesterday morning. Yesterday morning, yes. In 2020, there will be a homeless count again, a point in time count done on the Sunshine Coast. It is a day, sometime between, to say the dates, I haven't got the dates written down here. It's a month time frame that we get to pick. We get to pick the day that we choose in there. They gave us some ideas of how we can actually make that more, actually have more people coming forward. What they suggested is we don't actually talk about it as being a homeless count, even though that's how it's referred to provincially, but that we look at people who are unconventionally housed or precariously housed, because people won't necessarily say they're homeless if they're sleeping in their van. They feel they have a home. But their definition is they are in the same place for 30 days and paying rent. If they're not one of those, they're considered to be one of the people to be counted in this. So we have somebody appointed locally who will be spearheading it, and there'll be work done over the next little while to move this forward. That would then tie into what Councillor Rowe was talking about in some of these grant opportunities, to be able to look at what can we do to address some of the needs that come up. The other thing I just want to mention about the regional district, couple things. One is the Workforce Housing Group will be coming to the District of Sechelt to do a presentation in front of council so that we can hear what they're up to. One of the things that they have been defining is what is the difference between workforce housing and affordable housing. There is a difference. Affordable housing, the housing costs are based on your income, and a certain percentage of the building has deep subsidies, a certain percentage has regular subsidies, and actually a portion of it is at market rent. Whereas workforce housing, there's a requirement that whoever lives in there has to have a job. They also have to be able to review the person's equity. So if they have savings, have RSPs, etc., they can't get a subsidy. They have to use some of their equity, and that gets reviewed yearly. They have to meet those requirements every year. They can't just meet them once and move in. They have to re-qualify every year in order to be able to live in those facilities. So they will come and talk to us about their projects and their plans. They have some properties in Sechelt that they're looking at. They're not ideal. They're trying to see what they can put together, but they will be looking for our support in moving some of those forward, and they're desperately needed. And then one other thing on the regional district, tomorrow is Infrastructure Services Committee meeting. It's going to be a long meeting. We're looking at reservoirs. The report is back on the reservoirs. We'll be talking about groundwater and the drought management plan. Typically this meeting runs from 9:30 till about noon. They've extended it till 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And they actually took one of the items off of there and moved it off to another day. So it's going to be a long day tomorrow at the regional district. That's that. All right. Let's get back into the agenda and get to our council correspondence. All right, so we have 6 items on our council correspondence. First, a motion to receive the correspondence. Moved and seconded. All in favor of receipt? Thank you. And 2 of them have been identified for action. Let's start at the top first and look at these individually and see what we'd like to do with them. Iced Tea is talking about a multi-use trail and new tourism opportunities. This is an example of some funding that's been put forward by Iced Tea to one of the regions. We are looking at that locally as well to do with some of our trails here. We will have, I don't think I've mentioned it to council yet. I went to Iced Tea. I did mention that. I recently had a meeting at Iced Tea in Courtney, and I've had a conversation with the executive director over there. She will be attending our intergovernmental meeting that's coming up on the 25th, just for introductions. At that point, the agenda is full, but she is coming over, and we are having her then potentially meet with a number of different groups on the Sunshine Coast here who could potentially use Iced Tea funds for their projects. What we'd be looking at is she'd meet with them to find out whether or not the projects fit, and if they do, under what category they would fit. So that when they open up next year, April, for intake, that some of these projects could potentially move forward. So I think I've got 5 or 6 different groups already that I've sent off to her. She would be setting up meetings with them while she's over here. So just wanted to mention that one. On that one, the next one is a letter from the regional district requesting that we look at single-use plastics and packaging. And we will be receiving a letter as well from the Downtown Business Association around this. So I'm wondering if council would like to do anything on this at this point, or do we want to wait until we get the letter from the Downtown Business Association before we move something forward? Councillor Toth.
Too many meeting agendas. Are we not also expecting something in from the town of Gibson's?
Yes, that will be coming forward as well.
I would like to defer this until we have that as well, so we can look at them all at once.
Perfect. Next one, letter of support for community-to-community funding. We've put in an application to UBCM for funding to facilitate meetings with the other governments on the Sunshine Coast and requested letters of support. This is the letter of support that's come forward from the SCRD for that. Number 4, Public Library ebook advocacy. I would like to sign this on behalf of council, and I'd look for your support. Councillor Toth.
You'll have my support, but first I have to give a little spiel. Just some background on this. And I knew this before the library board actually got involved with it, but some of the largest publishing houses have taken very punitive measures against the lending of ebooks with libraries across the world, in that they expire after a certain number of lends, and the library needs to repurchase the material to still have it available to the library. A physical book can last for many years in the care of a library, and relicensing digital media after a short period is an undue burden on library budgets globally. So yeah, I'll move or second the recommendation that you sign this letter on behalf of council.
Okay. One of the other things that I read in this was that they're actually starting to remove the ability of libraries to even purchase the ebooks. So they're looking to take them off because they feel that they're not getting sufficient revenue. So we have a motion on the floor that I sign this on behalf of the District of Sechelt Council. And all those in favor? Any opposed? You're in favor?
Yeah, I have.
Okay, perfect. I didn't see that. Okay, next one, ABICC call for 2020 resolutions. This is just a note to us to keep in mind that we have until Thursday, February 6th to put forward nominations, resolutions and nominations for ABICC. So in the back of your mind, keep track of what comes up, and we'll put them to staff to put together recommendations, resolutions for us to bring forward. And the final one, did you want to speak to ABICC?
I actually just had a question. I know that there have already been a couple of suggestions from the regional district directors on possible things to go forward to AVICC. Is it would they normally send them to us as well for additional support, or is it just done from us at the regional district table?
Just at the regional district table. And they may put forward recommendations for resolutions. What happens then is staff actually takes those and researches in the database to see whether or not they've actually been addressed or brought forward already. And because if they've already come forward, particularly recently, they'll either have to modify them somewhat or not put them forward because they won't necessarily be endorsed. Okay. Councillor McLean.
Yeah, I don't think the SCRD needs to put forward recommendations. If we want to, as a District of Sechelt, we can as well. So something for this group to keep in mind as well.
I think what Councillor Toth was saying is, would they come to us for endorsement prior to them going forward? They don't have to. They could bring them to us, but they don't have to. All right, and the last correspondence piece is a letter from Robin Marriott from the Davis Bay Community Association and Davis Bay Wharf, regarding Davis Bay Wharf. And would anyone like to address this or not? Councillor McLean.
Yeah, so I attended the meeting at the Davis Bay Community Association. And at the end of the day, my main concern is the conflict within the users of the pier. I believe that everyone should be able to access the pier for crabbing, fishing, walking, and swimming. That's not happening right now. People are being blocked. People feel uncomfortable using this public space, and that's not okay. I don't like reducing access to public space, but I think this is where we're at now. We have been greatly impacted by the removal of DFO officers on the Lower Sunshine Coast. If we do restrict crabbing and fishing here, it's a direct result of DFO's failure to earn public trust that they can enforce fishing licenses and fishing rules on the Lower Sunshine Coast. The constant conflict between people using the pier is unacceptable. And I feel like the only way forward that we have in front of us right now is to reduce use of the pier, which is a shame.
Okay, any other comments by councillors? Councillor Toth.
I'm not sure that I agree, and I'm not sure that I can formulate how I don't agree with you yet, but maybe it'll come back to me. I have notes here that I did want to mention that if people are illegally or improperly harvesting from the wharf now at this time, changing the rules is not going to change anything in regards to illegal harvesting. We don't have staff that work at night to lock gates or anything to that effect. If we did want to gate it, lock it up at night, that's going to be an additional increase in staff time and an additional increase in staff costs. So I just wanted to say that.
Okay, Councillor Rowe.
just a general comment that I'm generally not in favor of bylaws that we can't enforce. And I don't know that we have the capacity to do that. I had a nice walk on the pier tonight as the sun set, all alone, because I'm single. But it was beautiful. I pretended I wasn't alone. But there were other people. I met a lady from Saskatchewan looking for whales as the sun was setting. Anyways, I'm just not sure about, I feel like that would be 0 to 60. Some of the simple things like a sign by the bait table that says, hey, this is your community, clean up after yourself. Like something basic. No, I know it's laughable, but that's my first, that's what comes to mind is, but the bottom line is I'm not sure how we would even enforce it anyways, given our current state of bylaw. I'm generally not in favor.
Okay. Anybody else want to comment before I weigh in? Nope. Nope. Okay. So I actually came back. I attended the meeting. I came back from the meeting and went to staff and started gathering some information. So first of all, we don't own the wharf. It's a provincial wharf. We lease it from the province. It was built in 1923, leased to Standard Oil, and we took over the lease in the late 80s. So we lease it from the province. They own it. We agree to maintain it. Any changes to the permitted uses would have to be cleared by the province. We can't actually go ahead and change the use unless the province agrees to that. The Davis Bay Pier is zoned M1. That means it's a working pier. So fishing, crabbing, and mooring boats are permitted uses. Ironically, it is not zoned for recreational use, and swimming is not listed as a permitted use. So, the grant application for the improvements that went forward in 2014 specifically state the improvements are to improve safety and functionality, and fishing is identified as a preferred use. At the time of the improvements, it was noted an economic analysis by the District of Sechelt envisions an increase of $600,000 in tourism spending based on an additional 9,500 visitors. And improvements in 2014 were funded by District of Sechelt, $100,000, Community Forest, $100,000, which again is District of Sechelt, so $200,000 basically from the District of Sechelt. Iced Tea Grant, $122,582, and gifts and plank sales from the community, $111,000, and in kind, about $40,000. In the report that went to Iced Tea, the completion said, today the wharf is popular with swimmers, divers, kayakers, wind and kite surfers, photographers, and bird watchers. The wharf is also popular with recreational fishermen and crabbers and tourists and seniors. The project has improved the wharf's capacity, safety, and accessibility, and increased its functionality and recreational value to the community and for all users. It is a popular tourist attraction. The restoration objective was also to respect the historical character of the wharf, and a bait table and water supply were installed. So it is a working pier. That's the historical character of the wharf. So the DFO and the conservation officer at the meeting at the Davis Bay Community Association meeting last week stated, and those in attendance agreed, there is no conservation issue in our area for crab. There is no commercial fishing allowed. A commercial fisherman could easily get 1,000 crabs a day. We don't see that many go through there. So it is very specific that the Davis Bay Pier is a working marine pier and actually not a recreational area. As the District of Sechelt leases the Davis Bay Pier, it would actually have to be researched if the intent or use of the pier may be altered, and this may also bring other legal challenges. So the use of the Davis Bay Pier for crabbing and fishing is consistent with the allowed uses. And since the meeting on whatever night that was, we've actually had a number of people in the community from all over the community who've come forward and indicated that they do not want us to close it for crabbing and fishing because they also use it as residents for crabbing and fishing. So personally, I'm not in favor of doing that at this time. There may be other things that we can do there, but I am not willing to personally move this forward. So if someone on council is willing to do that and see where it goes with council, go for it. Councillor McLean.
So I hear that restricting fishing and crabbing may have an issue for a wide variety of reasons, as you mentioned. But what are we going to do about the conflict that is on the pier almost daily? I think Councillor Scott made the comment last time that people need to play nice. That's not happening. And we can't just simply say, play nice. We need to do something. We need to do something to ensure that everyone can access this pier. And I want to explore that and see what we can do to make sure that this pier is available to everyone in this community.
I believe it is available to everyone in the community. It's whether or not they want to share it with everyone in the community. That's a different question. And I don't know how we tell people they have to share it. Both those who don't want crabbers and fishermen, and those who do, and the people who are swimming and having their families come down and share that. I don't know how we do that. Councillor Toth.
It's been a while since I've been out at the end of the pier, so forgive me for any ignorance here. Is there any potential for us to look at, in conjunction with park staff or what have you, separating things a little better? Yeah, sure, there's a sign there, but what's the proximity of the picnic benches to the crabbing area like? Could we add a second bait table, move the picnic tables further over to the other side? Would that help? I don't know. But
Councillor McLean.
So I believe there's 2 picnic tables. Yes, thank you. Currently the line, it's not really a line, is down the middle of the pier. If we put it between the 2 picnic tables and made some stronger indication that this picnic table is for fishers and crabbers, this picnic table is for swimmers. People are still going to ignore it, but is that the intent of what you're saying?
I suppose. I mean, again, I haven't been out there in a while, so I don't know if there's capacity to physically separate them more to make it inconvenient for the crabbers to be using one of those picnic tables so that it can be further removed. A bright yellow line down the middle of the pier, maybe we need to do that. We got highway marking paint out here somewhere, I'm sure. But, you know, I don't know that we need to go straight to a closure. I think there are things that we can try and explore that are going to be a lot less staff intensive in the meantime.
Is there only crab on the left side of the pier? Well, no, seriously, what's that? No, because the picnic tables are structurally under the cover, the gazebo, aren't they both? Yeah, I think I was just there, madam. But would it be possible to move the bait table and I mean, it's quite a square footage. Like could we look at moving the bait table and the water source to the other side of the pier, which would organically leave the other side for more picnic-related activities?
So I think
I don't know if it's possible.
What I'm hearing here is that we need some more time to look at this and see what we can come up with.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to trying to come up with solutions at all.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Councillor McLean?
Yeah, just to respond to that quickly, the ladder is on the one side. So we'd have to move the swimming ladder as well, and that's a significant cost.
Well, so is infighting on the pier to our community, so.
Absolutely.
Let's
Yeah.
look and see what it would be.
So, depending on where this goes, that ladder is actually not a swimming ladder officially, per what you had mentioned earlier. It's a boat. It's for boaters to climb. per our license.
And in that, does it matter where boaters use the ladder? Would we have to move it? Anyways, many questions.
So I think what I'm hearing is that we want to sit on this for a bit and potentially bring it back to another agenda down the road once we've had some more time to look at potential options for addressing the community concerns. Councillor Toth?
I'm going to make a suggestion, especially because Councillor Scott's not here. Could we maybe do a little walk around with a couple members from the Harbor Committee, the Director of Infrastructure or a designate, and the President of the Davis Bay Wilson Creek Selma Park Community Association, and see what we can do on the ground in terms of incremental improvements. We had an issue earlier, a couple agendas ago, with regards to, a hand launch, boat launch area. And it sounded, big and scary and expensive. And then when we went and looked at it on the ground, it really wasn't that big of a deal operationally. So I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to get out of this room, get some members together, and go do a specific meetinged site visit.
So what you're suggesting is that we refer this to the Harbor Committee? Okay, sounds good. Make that recommendation. I mean, other councillors can come as well if they want, if something's set up.
Refer it to the Harbor Committee with the idea of, with the direction of doing a field trip.
Okay. Is there a seconder? Would you like to second that? Okay. Yeah. You'll second it? Okay. So it's been moved and seconded. Any other comments? Councillor McLean.
I want to also make the suggestion that we do put staff time into this. And I'd like to see a report come back to council with input from the Harbor Committee and input from staff regarding options that we can do on the dock to better manage the use of the dock.
So that would come out of the walk around basically from the Harbor Committee and staff. Okay. So there is a motion on the floor right now. So you're basically fleshing out what that motion, what the intent of the emotion is.
Yes.
It's one thing to have a field trip. We need to have something actionable afterwards. We need to do a report on our field trip.
So the motion would be that this be referred to the Harbor Committee for a field trip to the wharf with staff member and the Harbor Committee and the President of the Community Association with a report to come back to committee, to council, to committee of the whole, or to council? To council? Back to council? Okay. Moved and seconded. Any other comments, questions? All those in favor? Thank you very much. All right, any emergency items? No emergency items? Motion to adjourn. Moved and seconded, all in favor? Thank you. Any questions from the gallery?